Hey, what's up, and welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. A ton of questions to get into, so we're just going to start with the first one from Jared. This is a long one, so strap in. Jared says this: why does everybody hate on Kevin for his emotions, or lack thereof, I should say? He's very even with his demeanor, and I think that that's a very valuable trait with the Browns. I'm also curious why everybody is ready to throw him out of town when the biggest problem on this team faces is the lack of an offensive line. He likes to run the ball, and due to salary cap constraints from the old unit that used to be top 5 during the Browns, really had 2 good seasons. He hasn't been able to establish the run and open up the rest of his playbook. I think Kevin is a great coach and hope he stays. I think this team needs to build the other trench, and we could get back to being a good offensive team as soon as next year. So I'll say this: as far as Kevin's demeanor goes, that's always been a lane of criticism of Kevin Stefanski I've never agreed with. Ultimately, it's going to be subjective, right? Some people are going to prefer a more even-keeled head coach. Some people are going to prefer, somebody who's more on the wear their emotions on their sleeve guy. I don't think one is objectively better than the other. I think each one serves their purpose. And I think the most important thing for a coach or anybody in a leadership position, from my experience, is to be true to themselves, right? If Kevin Stefanski is not a screamy, yelly person, and he's somebody who his version of leadership is making sure nobody freaks out because he's never freaking out, then that's fine. We've seen that work before, right? Like, that's okay. That's Bill Belichick's style. Bill Belichick, before his nonsense after he left the Patriots, was considered one of the greatest coaches of all time. It's certainly a template that works. Tony Dungy's style was similar to that. You can also be the classical, the almost like the movie theater, the movie kind of archetype of a football coach, where you're yelling and screaming and you're giving motivational speeches all the time, right? Kind of the template that Mike Tomlin falls into, right? A lot of other coaches, and you could be successful doing that. I think people being so focused on what his demeanor is as a point of criticism, as if how he carries himself is inherently bad, I thought was always wrong, right? I think Kevin's demeanor has proven more often than not to be a positive in Cleveland as far as the product on the football field goes, more than anything. Now, obviously, that doesn't mean that just because he has a good demeanor on the sideline, you're going to win a bunch of games, right? There's other things that go into that. But I've never felt like his demeanor, how he carries himself, has ever negatively affected the team. It's just that some people don't prefer that, and they confuse their lack of preference for somebody to act like that with a idea that anything that they don't prefer can't work. And that's just not true, right? There are coaches who act like jackasses and do shit that I don't like. All that, like Lane Kiffin's a perfect example. I hate the way Lane Kiffin carries himself, but he's clearly good at coaching football. Would I want him on my team? Probably not. But I can't sit here and act like everything Lane Kiffin does is inherently makes him a terrible football coach. It's just I don't really mess with it. But you have to have enough maturity, or at least enough growth, to understand that, hey, Lane does it differently. I would never like to do it like Lane, but Lane has found a way to be successful for a very long time in football, college or pro, carrying how he carries. And you got to give credit to that. Same thing can be true with Kevin, who operates in a way that I kind of like. I like coaches to not be sideshows and stuff like that. But sometimes the sideshow works. Sometimes the sideshow is what the locker room needs. I don't think that's the case here in Cleveland. Now, as far as Kevin and the criticisms about this year and why he should be kept, I have a hard time going with the Kevin is a victim of the roster argument. Because I think Kevin is a part of the reason why the roster looks like it does on the offensive side of the ball. I think the Browns, if Kevin had wanted to, the Browns could have made a push to get younger and cheaper on the offensive line a little bit earlier. But I think Kevin, out of loyalty to the guys who were on this line when he first got the job, has stuck with them, right? Through thick and thin, through multiple different coaches. You know, he's had multiple jumping off points with this offensive line, but he's chosen time and time that the problem wasn't them. It was the offensive line coaches that surrounded him. And they kind of doubled down into the issues that they have now. So I can't say that Kevin's like completely off the hook for the offensive issues. Here's my thing with Kevin right now. If you give Kevin Stefanski a great roster, I'm sure he'll give you a good offense. But will Kevin Stefanski get more out your roster than what is there offensively? That's where I used to feel good about Kevin, where I don't feel as good about him anymore. He's a competent head coach, don't get me wrong, right? If you give him good pieces, he's going to put together something solid. But is he going to get the most out of it? Is he going to squeeze the most juice out that lemon that can be squeezed? And can we do better than that? Or is it reasonable for us to think we could do better than that? That's really the heart of the question right now. Because, if you give him a competent offense, he'll give you a competent offense back. Right now, the Browns don't have the pieces to be super competent on offense. But we do have the pieces to be mediocre, and we're terrible. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing. I feel like we're a step below where we should be talent-wise. And I think a constant criticism of Kevin, even when he's been good, has been that the offensive production has always been a step down from what you'd hope it be. And that's where you have to ask, hey, is Kevin good at utilizing talent versus asking if Kevin has enough talent to be utilized well. We're going to get into more questions, but first I want to thank my sponsor, Sleeper. Real quick, just want to let you guys know Sleeper has a new offer here. They're offering a free $20 entry, no deposit required. And also, if you're a first-time user, you also will receive a 100% match on up to $100 when you use the promo code Worst Take. Again, $20 free, no deposit required. Plus, first-time users also receive 100% deposit match up to $100. Join Sleeper. Chase him with the next question. Says, at 3-8, where do you feel this team actually has progressed from last season, and what areas have they clearly regressed? Can you point to specific improvements you're confident will carry into next year? I don't think they've regressed because they already have matched their win total from last year. So as pathetic as it is, they were a 3-win team last year. They're a 3-win team currently with like 7 games left. At worst, they have stayed the same, but more than likely they have made some progress here, and they haven't regressed, right? So there is that. It's not like impressive, but there's that. I don't think they've regressed. What improvements am I confident will carry into next year? I think they have made significant improvements on the defensive side of the ball, upgrading the talent on the interior of the defensive line. And I think the improvements that they've made in their talent acquisition as far as the draft goes over the last few years gives me a lot of confidence going forward, right? You look at the 2022 draft, it's a lot more useful. 2023 draft, 2023 and 2024 and 2025 drafts. Those 3 drafts have been very, very good for the Browns considering what they brought into it. And that encourages me going forward about their ability to get the most out of the many draft assets that they're going to carry into next season. So that is what I'm encouraged about. The next question comes from Daryl, who says this. Shadeur Sanders' start left me wanting more, but I'm a realist and a long-time Browns fan. To me, a young QB may at some point hit a wall and need to sit a game or two. I thought Gabriel needed to, and I believe at some point Shadeur will have to reflect and grow. I'd expect both to understand the task and challenges better in their second run of starts. Would you agree? I know the ideal situation for Shadeur is to go full-time Brady, but I'm just not there yet. I can see Gabriel playing more loose, easier than I can see Shadeur eliminating all his pocket issues. I do think Shadeur provides more upside, but also the lower floor if he can't continually limit his bad habits. So this is, I thought, a very nuanced kind of, I don't even know if it was a question. I think it's just a take, to be honest with you. But it was such a nuanced take that I got to show some appreciation for. So thank you for that, for Daryl. Yeah, I do have the same concerns, right? And this is why I stress, like, when it comes to quarterback development, there's this idea that the later you take a guy, the quicker you can find out about him. But that's not really the case, right? It's just that the later you take a quarterback, the more biased or the more you're inclined to believe he's not going to work out. So the quicker you're ready to just lean into that, right? The truth is, we're really not going to know what Dillon Gabriel is for a very long time in his NFL career, regardless of if he's on the Browns or not. I mean, we're not going to know what Shadeur Sanders is until he gets a few years under his belt in the NFL, right? Like, we're not going to know. I know people are like, oh, you play them for 6 games, you're going to know what they are or have a good idea. And it's not true. 6 games into Baker Mayfield's career, did we know who Baker Mayfield would be? You know what I mean? Like 6 games into Deshaun Watson's run in Cleveland, we were still arguing whether he'd be able to get back to 2024. Like, it's so often that 6 games isn't enough to really know. The question is, how long do you wait? Right? How much patience can you afford in this moment? Here's what I'll say. For Dillon Gabriel and for Shadeur, both of them, the reality is this. They're going to have to, in order to succeed, continue to be resilient, because odds are that they're not just going to get handed the keys and get the easy life, right? The easy life for a quarterback who's developing, that goes to the guy who's drafted number 1 overall, right? Cam Ward, he can make all the mistakes in the world. He's going to keep his job. He's going to get the opportunity to play through those mistakes and develop because he was the number 1 overall pick in the draft. Whether it's fair or not, that's just how it works. For Shadeur, for Dillon, in order for them to earn a starting job, they're going to have to do a lot more than Cam Ward would have to, right? Because that's just where they were drafted. That's just how they're perceived right now. So if you're a Shadeur fan or a Dillon fan, I think you got to be open to the idea of that journey taking a long time. Everybody wants to believe in the fairy tale journey of, hey, this guy goes from rookie to getting an opportunity to taking over the franchise. And that's what we all want to believe in. And that makes us all feel good. And it gives us the warm feeling in our stomachs. But the reality of the NFL is a lot of guys got to hang around for a long time to get that opportunity, even when they're highly drafted, right? Look at a guy like Trey Lance. He hasn't really gotten a big opportunity. You know what I mean? He's been bouncing around team from team, trying to get spot starts here and there. There's a high chance that this journey for Shadeur and Dillon is going to have to be a difficult, windy road for both of them. Shadeur could play okay, but if the Browns are in a position to take a quarterback, they're going to take a quarterback. And if you're Shadeur, maybe you're hoping you could play yourself into a Drew Brees, Phillip Rivers situation where, that's how you get your opportunity, right? But we got to be open to the idea that this is going to happen, or this could happen in more unconventional ways, because once we're talking about quarterbacks who are drafted later, the odds are your path to becoming a starting quarterback in the league is going to have to be unconventional, because the conventional routes are going to be given to the guys who are drafted at the top of the draft, to the guys who are going to be, given a ton of money to start at quarterback. And to think about this, right, it gets harder and harder as each year goes on, because more quarterbacks are entering the draft and being drafted at the top and taking those slots. There's only 32 of them. So, yeah, I mean, this is why journeys take a while. This is why Geno Smith's journey took so long. And I don't think it's a bad thing. And I think here's what I can say that's really positive about both of these young guys is that I think they have mentally what it takes to be able to withstand that journey, especially Shadeur, who has a lot of confidence in himself. I think, if his journey has to be a little obscure, I think he'll come out fine from it. The question is, will the media environment around him allow for his journey to take more time? Because there's a possibility to where teams just decide they don't want to deal with it because it's too much noise for somebody who's not going to be the starter, and then you run into issues there, right? I brought up in my video, Shadeur is not the same level of prospect, in my opinion, as like as a Johnny Manziel or Tim Tebow. I think he's clearly better than those two, or at least he's a clearly more close to professional quarterback than those two. Tim Tebow, because Tim Tebow was just a mess, and then Johnny Manziel, obviously Johnny Manziel was also just a mess off the field, but for very different reasons than Tim Tebow. I think Shadeur has the talent to become a starter, but I do think it's going to take a little while. And the question is, will the environment calm down around him to the point to where a team can just give him that time to develop, so that once he's ready, he can get his opportunities when he needs them, But yeah, I appreciate your take on it. Very nuanced. Let's get to the next guy. Effective guy says this: what are the differences in the offense do you want and need to see before the end of the season for keeping Stefanski? I don't think whether the Browns keep Stefanski is going to come down to the offensive production for the rest of the year, in my opinion. The book's written on that. It's not a good book. It's a pretty negative book for Kevin. The question has to be, the question that needs to answer is if this offense can get better. It's why has the offense been bad, right? What are the internal reasons for the offensive play being as poor as it has been the last couple of years? Are there legitimate reasons that are bigger than Kevin Stefanski that exist behind the scenes for that? If that's the case, they'll probably keep him, because they understand that there were some bigger problems there. If that's not the case, then Kevin's got to go, right? I'm not privy to how they set up the offense, why they set up the offense the way they did. I'm not in the quarterback room. I'm not in the meeting rooms. I'm not in, the Zoom meetings with Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry. I don't have insight on that. So they got to come to their own determination when it comes to that. But that's what I would say is like, hey, if you have a reasonable explanation for why the problems that exist are bigger than Kevin Stefanski on offense, or not necessarily his fault, then sure, don't fire him, right? Don't fire somebody if they're not the problem. But unless that's the case, I just don't see how this is not Kevin's problem. You know what I mean? He could put together a little bit better offense, but the problems that we've seen have just been so big that I don't think 6 or 7 weeks is going to change me on it. If we somehow miraculously end up going 8-9, something similar, barely missed the playoffs, to what extent will the coaches front office catch fire for waiting on Shadeur this long? Will there be firings? Maybe a dumb question. I'm relatively new to all the in and outs of the NFL. I would say this: after watching Shadeur's film for the last couple of weeks, I don't think internally there's going to be any flack for waiting to put Shadeur out there, because it seems to me that there is an agreement that there's some stuff that you would want your quarterback to be able to do within the structure of the offense that he's not there yet at. And you could tell with how they structure the game plan, right? I think JT O'Sullivan did a really good breakdown on that aspect of it. I would go check it out if I were you guys. But I don't see anything from watching his tape that tells me that Shadeur's been ready to go for a long time here, and that he was so ready that the Browns should catch some flack for not starting him earlier. I know that's going to be a very unpopular opinion on the internet. Everybody seems to be going the other way on this. I'm just saying, from what I see on tape, I see a guy who probably needed to wait half a season to play and would have likely been better served waiting even a couple more weeks if it were possible, but it wasn't, so he ended up playing. So, no, I don't think they're going to catch any flack for it. I don't think they should. They probably will from like the media and the public, but internally, I doubt it. The Ruck says, what's good, Q? Hope you had a good Thanksgiving. I did. My question is, would Shadeur had ever seen the field if Dillon Gabriel never gotten that concussion? Just thinking about that, I think he would have. It was just getting to a point to where continuing to play Dillon just wasn't going to be in the best interest for Dillon Gabriel at some point. Also, I think they were leaning towards moving on from Dillon for at least a period of time here. because Dylan had ran into some issues where I don't think you get through them by playing through it. You know what I mean? So yeah, I think we would have saw Shadeur. My whole thing was I thought we were going to see him in the Raiders game, and we ultimately did. So I think things went relatively how they wanted to. In a perfect world, I think they could have gone. I think they were hoping they could go the whole season without playing Shadeur, but in order to develop him to their best ability, but that's not what happened. And I think once they traded Joe Flacco, I think they thought to themselves, he's probably going to play, come week 12. Erica Bone would say, hey, what would Shadeur have to do if you want to see him get the nod for the 2026 season? He has to develop more meat and potatoes to his game, right? Talked about this a lot in film breakdown, talked about this a lot in post game. Right now, that first game, he was able to get the gravy, right? And that's the gravy is like the throw to Isaiah Bond, the stuff he's doing out of structure. That's all good and all, but teams are going to take the gravy away and they're going to force you into your meat and potatoes, the bulk of your dish. And that's where we have to see Shadeur make a ton of progress. If he makes that progress and he can add the gravy on top of that, then he'll get opportunities to start for 2026. And even if the Browns drafted a quarterback in 2026 draft, he would still get a healthy opportunity to start before they would want to throw that guy out there. So yeah, I think it's going to take that. He has to get better at some of the basics, some of the footwork stuff, managing the pocket, climbing the pocket. That stuff has to show a lot of development. Next question comes from Rhea, who says, watching the latest video about the defense and admitting that culture is changing in the locker room, should the Browns risk that by getting a new head coach, that Kyle's drastic change, the culture that's beginning to be established? It's something to consider, right? Because I do think Kevin is a part of that. I would say there are ways to move that can keep what you have in take and have somebody add to it. I think you can keep Jim Schwartz in place at defensive coordinator, keep that staff in place, and maybe add a new offensive coordinator / head coach to kind of add to it. But yeah, it's something to consider. And it's why, much like most other moves in the AFC North, where every other team in the division wants to fire their coach, because these coaches have track records of success, and they are doing some things well, and at the end of the day, they are competent coaches. It's not the easiest thing to move on from them, right? And that's the case with Kevin. It's not super easy to make that decision because you're losing stuff if you fire Kevin, right? When we fired most other coaches in franchise history, we were losing nothing because they weren't good coaches or competent. This is a little different. Tyler Gossett says, hey, Q, is there an explanation for why Kevin decided to punt from the 29 at the end of the game? The conspiracies are dumb, but I also don't know why he wouldn't kick the field goal. My guess is either they were being like extremely conservative there and they were just not even wanting to risk a blocked field goal. The theory I go with that makes the most sense to me, they were at 10 sacks and I think they wanted to get the record. So they just wanted to put the ball in play as soon as possible to help the defense get to that record. That's what I think they were trying to do. But who knows? At the end of the day, it was a pretty meaningless play there, unless you're betting, right? Because apparently that made it go under. But yeah, I would be shocked if Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry were, trying to do something to work the gambling markets. That doesn't really seem like who they are at all. Good or bad, right? You can say a lot of good and bad things about Kevin and Andrew, but I don't think anybody's ever gotten to read that these guys are compulsive gamblers. You know what I mean? But y'all let me know what y'all think in the comment section down below. Y'all have a great day. Have an even better night. Peace.